All right, I did not memorize this, so you're gonna get the great value version of my speech. But I hope you like it. So many of us here want to make the world a better place. But why? A few months ago, I realized that for people like me, we have little choice. I got this. So a few months ago, I graduated. Graduation was one of the happiest and most painful moments of my life. I had finally found closure to my time as a student after having transferred out of a community college a few years ago. And I was doing things people believed that we couldn't do. But suddenly, I found myself job hunting for my mom. I found myself making another resume for her, figuring out how to relocate her, and researching how to fill out her divorce papers. My parents still don't speak English. They still never went to college. And as I began to fill out their papers, I felt like I was going through the divorce. Only after I followed numerous therapy accounts on Instagram did I realize that my parents had something called learned helplessness. So in psychology, learned helplessness is a state that occurs after a person has experienced a stressful situation again and again. They start to believe that no matter what they do, nothing will change. So they just stop trying, even when opportunities for change become available. My parents grew up in a society where education was so overvalued that they were completely ignored because they didn't go to college. They also grew up in post-Chinese Civil War, largest man-made famine in the world, post-World War II Taiwan. I tell people that my dad lost everything twice. Once when his family fled from China to Taiwan, and again when he escaped to America. It wasn't until my university gave me the financial means to escape my hometown did I realize that there were many more people like me. We were overachieving parentified children. So parentification occurs when a child is regularly expected to provide support emotionally or practically for the parent. There's a role reversal. The child takes on adult responsibilities instead of receiving that support themselves. There's long-term negative effects on a child's physical and mental health as a result. So until then, I didn't know that I shouldn't have been doing my homework and then doing my mom's community college homework and then sleeping less than 4 hours a day. I didn't know that I shouldn't have been calling car and housing insurance for things I've never owned. I didn't know that I shouldn't have been feeling like I was going through a divorce despite never being married. Later I found out, whether it was on the streets of Baltimore, where I worked one summer, or amongst the FLY community at my university. So FLY stands for First Generation Limited Income Students. Amongst the FLY community, I saw parentified children everywhere. We were doing things that we shouldn't have been doing. I later read a theory that it was a common pattern amongst people who grew up in communities that lacked resources or had ancestors that did. The scarcity mindset and trauma can pass on for generations, even when conditions change. But then, I read something else. A research trial conducted found that 2/3 of its respondents, its social workers, were parentified children or identified as hyper-independent. A Harvard graduating class recently found that its FLY students were way more likely to have careers in public policy than students who were not FLY. And when people donate, people with lower incomes tend to donate a higher proportion than higher income people. So it made me ask why, but it made sense to me now. And seeing in university why there were a lot of students who still had all these family obligations and they were still willing to do them on top of their coursework, on top of trying to find a job and doing extracurriculars. It turns out for people like us, even when we had little space left, we were still making space for other people. So despite everything, we were still here. Despite everything, many of us still wanted to make the world a better place or even take on jobs for social impact. What I experienced, never again, we said. But why? It's because we were given this beautiful gift in the ugliest way possible. We were given this deep compassion and understanding for people because it felt like we had seen it all. Because no matter how people treated us, no matter how much they hit us or bruised us or abandoned us, we would still wake up the next day, we would still be there, and we would still work and hope for a better tomorrow. This isn't the right way to do things. Like many, I burned out. I realized that until I addressed my lack of boundaries, I would be forever finding myself back in workspaces and relationships that were very happy to take advantage of me, mirroring my experience growing up. I tell myself that my parents aren't bad people, they just didn't know better. They just wanted better for me. But it didn't change the fact that suddenly I woke up day after day with no energy to get out of bed, no energy to do what I wanted, even the stuff that I had loved. How was I going to make the world a better place like this? Things didn't change for me until I started telling my parents no and started focusing on how I was feeling. My experience aligns with the givers and takers theory by organizational psychologist Adam Grant. He defines givers as people who like to give more than they get, takers like to get more than they give, and matchers like to get as much as they give. He also found, in terms of financial success, givers surprisingly perform both the worst and the best. The difference? The givers that performed the worst only focused on what others needed, but the givers that performed the best also had an awareness of what they personally needed. It was scary to realize that I could either succeed well or fall hard, and it depended completely on my self-awareness and ability to set boundaries. And according to Grant, successful ventures flourish when givers can also flourish. We're all here because we're interested in careers that make a positive social impact. So that probably means you'll be very likely to work with someone or even hire someone who was a parentified child or someone similar. You might notice that if you keep pushing and asking, we will just keep saying yes. So while we need to do the work to set our better boundaries, you shouldn't be taking advantage of us. You might be able to get away with exploitative practices and high turnover rates for a few years, but creating cultures where you're supposed to bend over backwards will leave you with self-interested people in power. You too will also be left with nothing. And this isn't just about governments or big corporations. This is about NGOs, nonprofits, small businesses, people who originally set out to make the world a better place. The problem is that not everyone grows up with life experiences to understand exactly what boundaries they are crossing. I saw this exploitative phenomenon a lot at my university, in job recruitment, and an article I recently read about how wealthier people tend to have less empathy. But they don't always mean to. Many just don't have to face as many obstacles growing up. So how else can we get people to understand others' difficulties without them necessarily having to go through them? After some research, I believe this is why we need to tell more stories about underrepresented populations. It led me to start creating a YouTube channel with videos about reactions to affirmative action, creating diversity trainings, and seeking storytelling as a form of healing. My animation studio startup sought to give individuals a chance to rewrite their story where they are surprisingly accepted as they are. Hopefully, we can work towards a world that builds people up, no matter where they're from. Until we gain tools to stop exploiting generous people, we'll be exactly like the groups we don't stand for. Parentified children, fly students, marginalized communities, givers, people like us. We are so powerful. We have a perseverance and compassion for people that is so strong that it can lift people up. But our generosity and power needs to be purposely protected and perceived. Our stories and experiences need to be validated again and again, even if we're unaware of them, so that we can break generational cycles. We need to be not directed, but coached as a whole person. We also need the financial means to imagine a world beyond our own, like my university financial aid did for me. All I can offer you is what I learned along the way. I eventually realized that I needed to strike the right balance between thinking of myself and others, and I needed to be around people who had the curiosity, compassion, understanding, and faith to believe that too. My future is so bright that it can brighten others' futures, and so is yours. But apparently, I can't light the way for anyone if I myself can't shine. Thank you.